What's up, Warriors, and welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Movement Podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I am your host, Chris. Thank you guys so much for these last couple weeks. These last couple podcast releases have been pretty solid, have been gaining a little more traction on them again. Thank you for Jason coming on my most recent podcast. That was a very productive conversation. As you guys know, I try to advocate for anybody talking about their mental health journey. So it's nice to have another fellow man be willing to talk about their journey. So today's guest, I have known for I think about maybe 2 years now, and we just recently started, consistently talking about stuff that we're going through and whatnot. And she's been on a similar journey to me. She's a fellow warrior. She also advocates for mental health, and has been dealing with her own traumas and healing from that. Please help me welcome Charity. Charity, how you doing today?
I'm really good, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm so grateful that you came on the podcast and were willing to talk about your journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So the first thing just kind of wanted to cover was I feel like the easiest one to start with, just to give people an idea of where your journey started. So I want to start with childhood trauma. I'm very familiar with childhood trauma, unfortunately, and uncovering all that stuff. So where did this mental health journey start for you?
Wow. Mental health journey started when my son's father committed suicide by cop. I found a suicide prevention rock um, at a doctor's office, and that's what led me to the suicide prevention rocks, which led me to you, which this is where we are now. So, yeah.
That's crazy that we've known each other that long. I didn't realize it was that long ago. What, 4 years then, not 2 years?
It's been almost 4 years, I think.
That's crazy.
I
And
know.
I'm so sorry for your loss. Suicide is a very touchy subject for so many, and every podcast I do, I want to bring up the topic of suicide because it's such a taboo subject that I
It
feel
really is.
not enough people want to talk about. You know what I mean? Um,
Right.
so like growing up, and did you go through anything traumatic with your parents that I guess essentially led you to the healing journey that you're on now?
Yeah, my mom was physically and mentally abusive. You couldn't do anything right around her. My father, he was kind of an angel in my eyes, but he was also an alcoholic, so that just clashed everything in our house. My parents were never happy. They tried to get a divorce like 3 times. Never signed the paperwork. Never slept in the same bed ever since I was 4 years old. It was just a lot of walking on eggshells my whole entire life. So I got tired of it. And when I started seeing my son get depressed, that's when I was like, all right, we got to change something around here because I can't
Right.
do this anymore.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine. Well, I can't imagine the parents thing. I mean, my parents divorced when I was very young, so anything that happened between them was when they weren't together, but it was almost as if they were still together
Still
because
together, yeah.
my mom held on to that for 20 years and still starts fights for no reason, and
Dang.
which brings me to my favorite subject of the podcast, and that's a narcissistic parent.
Right.
um, so people that have listened to my podcast, and if you've ever listened to my story, at least a little bit about my mom, or just enough to know what I've gone through. So over the last couple years, over your relationships and with your son and everything, what kind of narcissist behavior did you have to experience through your mom? Because I know you said she was abusive.
Yeah, she was abusive. She was also mentally abusive. Just you're stupid. She never told me she was proud of me. Apparently, she said she read some book when I was little that not to tell your kids you're proud of them. I don't know what book she read, but I hope they threw it in the trash or set it on fire. Um, and then as I got older, I would put out ideas like, oh, I want this truck, or I wouldn't mind having that one day. Well, she just started buying stuff that I was talking about. So it's almost like having a jealous sister. and it's really crazy. I mean, even to this day, I told her not long ago that I like Ford pickups because they're comfortable. And now she has a brand new Ford pickup.
What? Oh no.
I'm just like, okay. Don't give her ideas anymore.
Yeah. Um, recently, well, not recently, I guess like 2 years ago now, my mom stayed a week with me. And, obviously that's a huge step for me because of the relationship I have with her. And when she was down here, because I have tattoos, I have mental health tattoos, I have stuff that I love,
Yeah,
stuff I'm passionate about.
yeah,
Um, and she saw my semicolon tattoo and she didn't know what it was for because, I told her, I'm like,
yeah,
it's for suicide awareness. Like,
yeah. It's a
unless
symbol.
you're right. And we were looking for, or she was looking for tattoo artists in the area. And when she was telling this guy what kind of tattoo she wants, she looks at me and she's like, "Oh, I want it to look like that." And I immediately looked at her and was trying to like process it. And I'm like, "You want to match tattoos? What? Why?" And I kind of started figuring out that she was trying to make herself look like she was self-aware of the shit that I have gone through, or when
Right.
she gave me away after my first suicide attempt.
Mm-hmm.
And when she got off the phone with the tattoo artist, I said, "Mom, we're not getting matching tattoos." I said, "You are
No
not
way.
matching my tattoo." Hell no. And
No,
she said, "Oh, you don't want to have the same tattoo?" I'm like, "No, this is unique to
not with
me."
you.
Right. I said, "This tattoo is unique to me. Like, get
Yeah,
your own damn tattoo."
yeah.
And I went with her to get the tattoo that she was getting. She got a mental health awareness tattoo. And, just the whole time she's sitting there talking about how I'm a mental health advocate and, trying to talk me up to this tattoo artist. I'm like, so you're trying to get in my good graces. You're trying to get a tattoo for mental health awareness. And you're telling everybody that this is her words, I'm her mental health advocate.
Right. Yeah.
She said
No.
that on the phone like 3 or 4 different times.
Oh my gosh.
And I picked up on all of that. I'm like, that is some of the most narcissistic shit I've ever heard in my life
Right.
because it's not genuine.
No, it's not.
And
Nothing about it is genuine.
right. So, which leads me to a question, since we're talking about genuine and not genuine or ingenuine things our wonderful narcissist parents can do. Did your mom do a lot of I love you, just like try and love bomb you to death, like make
No.
it seem like she gave a shit about you?
Well, I take that back. Yeah. When I was little, yeah. And then I got older, and then she just kind of gave up on that. But we weren't really, God, we weren't really that much of a lovey family. We didn't say I love you. We didn't give hugs. We just kind of, everybody was separate, you
I,
know?
I've always felt like it's interesting when there's abuse involved in the family, and when there's a narcissist involved in the family, how there's two completely different extremes.
It really is.
And my mom would always play off she's a strong, independent, loving mom. She cares about her kids so much. And I remember telling one of my she used to be my best friend. We haven't talked in years, about my mom. And she's like, "Really? She comes off as such a great person."
That's what all my friends said.
And I showed her the text messages my mom sent me, and her jaw went on the floor. I'm like,
Yep.
"Dude, my mom puts on a mask for everybody."
Everybody.
And
And
like,
don't piss her off.
yeah, yeah, because then her real color or her true colors come out.
Yep.
And have you ever had like any police officers like
Oh
involved
my gosh.
with your mom
I've had the police called on me, I don't know how many times, to be
from
honest with
her?
you, from her. The last time she called the police on me, it was to do a welfare check on my son, all because I returned a safe that I didn't want from her. Yeah,
My God.
I know. I was
The
like, really?
the last time I had to deal with my mom and cops being over at the house, I think I was like 17, 18, somewhere around there. And I remember the cops saying to me, out of every adult in the house, you're the most mature. You know how often I heard that from police officers about my
Yep.
parent? it's embarrassing.
It
It
is
really is.
embarrassing.
And you know, I don't know if I've told this story out loud. I don't know if I've ever said it in the group, but in like 2009, my mom faked her kidnapping. And yeah, okay, so I've never told this story out loud. That's crazy.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
so she faked her kidnapping, trying to get like $2,800 for my dad, or like 28,000, something like that. And cops couldn't find anybody who kidnapped her. She refused an essay test, uh,
Uh-huh.
and a year later, I started going to college, and one of my professors pulled me aside after the class. Hey, are you so and so? Is this your mom? I'm like, yeah. Was she like, I assumed that she was in one of his classes or something. He was one of the officers on the case, and he felt the need to tell me that he remembers me
Wow.
because of that.
Wow.
Talk about embarrassing.
That is embarrassing. And now I have a similar story. So I got in trouble. I don't know if I got in trouble or I tried to kill myself. I was 16 dating a boy. It was over a boy, right? It was more attention getting than it was planning or anything. Well, I came home and my parents decided they were going to tell me some stories about themselves when they were younger. Well, dad's I kind of believed. Like he said he did heroin. He was like, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. Well, my mom tells me that she went to the grocery store one day, and this is up in the panhandle of Texas, so everybody's friendly with everybody, and this is back in probably the 60s. And she said she went to the grocery store and some guy asked her to find a house. Well, she just got in the car with him and he took her out in the middle of the nowhere. He beat her to death. He raped her, all this stuff. I started asking my family about this, I think 2 or 3 years ago, because there was a big fight between my grandmother and my mom. And I started asking all my family, and they're like, that never happened. I'm like, what?
Oh no. It's even worse when the family members confirm it never happened.
Yeah. Yeah, it never happened. I was like,
And
dang.
the worst part of having to experience this stuff is it's so hard for us to I don't know about you. I know it is for me. It's so hard for us to remember good times
Yeah,
when
it really is.
like I specifically remember everything awful that has happened to me from 4 years old to when I stopped talking to my mom.
Do you have a
And
bad memory?
not a terrible memory, but like I can't remember anything positive out of my childhood.
Yeah,
Like
you're
it's like
right.
kind of like blocked out for some
Yeah.
reason. And I think it's just because of everything that surrounded those bad times, or those good times was horrible.
Yeah.
Like the earliest memory I have is when I was 4 years old and I took my dad to one of his friend's house that my mom was sleeping with.
Oh,
I literally not drove him there, but I showed him where this person lived.
dang.
Yeah. And that's forever burned in the back of my brain.
I have something similar. Like my dad, he took a swig of vodka while I was sitting in the car with him, and he looks at me and he tells me, "Don't tell mom." Well, mom asked me about it a couple weeks later. Has he ever drank in the car with you? I'm little, so I tell my mom the truth because she's gonna get mad at me if I don't. And of course, I'm like, "Yeah, he took a drink in front of me," and so that just exploded in my face. But
Right.
you're just a little kid and they're asking you these questions and it's like, "Wait, like you're supposed to tell the truth."
Yeah.
And boy, they wrap the kids up in it. And
Right.
I really hate it. Like my ex-husband was doing that with my son.
Right. And one of the hardest things for me growing up was when my siblings were born. I love my brother and my sister very much, and this is not a knock at them. This is not a dig at them.
Right.
When my brother was born, my mom and dad seemingly forgot about me.
Yep.
I was treated like a ghost.
Mhm.
And when my sister was born, that was 4 years after my brother, um, I didn't exist. And, for the longest time, I was told I'm overreacting, I'm oversensitive, and I was just imagining all these things. 31 years old, almost 32 now. And I finally hear from my grandparents, in the last 6 months, that my parents treated me like that. That
Really?
all those years of me saying and feeling that was validated from somebody that I have not the best relationship with, but negative
A
feelings
relationship.
towards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have a relationship. Yeah, I
And
have a relationship with my grandmother.
it hurts to hear from another person because for your whole life you were told that you're over exaggerating.
Mhm.
And you know, now that we're here and we're all older, my brother and I, we talk a little bit more than we ever have, and that's mainly because we're both on our own and stuff. My sister and I still don't really have much of a relationship, and we're 8 years apart. So I mean, that's
Yeah, that makes a difference.
almost always going to make a difference because it's like I lived through my 20s, and she's just now experiencing things that I experienced when I was much younger.
Right.
And it's hard to form that relationship with her because you try to give her advice to make sure she avoids making any mistakes that you made. And then you look at my brother's side of things where we didn't grow up in the same household. He has a much better relationship with my father than I do,
Mhm.
because they're more alike as people. And no matter what I've done in my life, no matter how much good, how much positive changes I make, I don't seem to get that validation from either parent. And I'm at this point in my life where I don't need it,
Right.
but it would be nice to just hear for once, just like even 5-second conversation, I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
Not calling me to vent about my brother or to call me and vent about my sister.
Yep.
Because that's literally every conversation with my dad.
That's been my every conversation with my mother lately. It's just about my grandma and how my grandma's getting old and she can't deal with this and she can't deal with that. And it's like, okay. And I'm fine being a person to vent to, like you and I
Sure.
do it. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, the conversation's over now with
Right.
them. They're done. They already did their venting, so now they don't care about you anymore.
Right.
It's
And it's not like I don't think in these last 4 years almost 4 years that I've been in therapy, he's never asked once about it. He's never asked
mm,
once about the mental health stuff. Never once asked about how I'm doing. Nothing.
come to think
And
of it, I haven't been asked the same thing
yeah.
either.
And it's like I wish I was exaggerating. I really do.
Oh yeah, I wish I was too. I mean, you're talking about growing up with brothers and sisters. I was the only child. So I was noticed and I did everything wrong in my mother's brain, but she also trained me to be her little maid. I
Right.
mean, I
Right.
clean the house all the time.
That's how my little sister is.
Yep.
And every time I talk to her, her situation is complicated because she's living with my mom's ex, and she lives in New Jersey, so things are a little bit more expensive up there.
Yeah.
But she'll complain about having to clean dishes and having to do this, having to do that. I'm like, Kayla, you're a grown ass adult. You don't have to do any of those things. Well, if I don't do it, nobody else will.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's like you don't have to do any of that shit.
Mm-mm.
You know?
Especially when you live with other people.
Yeah. And it's really hard to connect with both my brother and sister because mentally I'm in a completely different place in terms of how I think about things. Like with Kayla, she was so coddled and so protected for most
Right.
of her life that like if I'm trying to explain something to her with my therapy brain,
Yeah.
that it kind of translates to her in one ear and out the other because it's like, oh, well, if I want to go to therapy, I'll go to therapy kind of response
Yeah.
without saying it like that.
Right.
And with my brother, he's very reserved. So if we try to talk about anything, it usually only gets talked about when he's at like a high emotion state of mind because it's like
Gotcha.
now you're ready to talk about it.
Yeah.
But with people like you and me that hold that space for so many damn people,
I
there
know.
aren't very many people that hold that space for us.
No, there's not.
So that kind of leads into the second talking point I wanted to talk about, which is depression and anxiety. You know,
Mm.
you said you were diagnosed with both, right?
Yes.
How old were
Mm.
you when that diagnosis was officially diagnosed?
24, 25. It
Okay.
was it was around Christmas. My son was 3 or 4, and I finally just my husband caught me in the car crying, and for no reason.
Right.
So I told him, I was like, we've got to go to the emergency room. I need something. I need to do something about this because I'm tired of feeling this way. And I had postpartum pretty bad the first year of Devin's life, never got it treated. And then it just turned into depression, anxiety, and anger all the time.
Right.
So, I had to fix something.
And what medication did they put you on when you got diagnosed?
So they did put me on Zoloft,
Hmm.
which I'm still on the same milligram, 50 milligrams once a day, which is low for some people, but I'm a skinny little thing, so sometimes I don't need all that.
Right.
They also put me on Xanax, which that was back when they still gave you Xanax, and I abused it,
Yeah.
and it was just not good for me
Did you
at
have
all.
to like go to like a program or a rehab or anything when you say you
You
abused it?
know,
Or
every time I've abused anything, I've abused drugs, alcohol. Anytime I abuse anything, I gain the strength and I quit myself and I don't go to rehab, which I'm proud of.
yeah, yeah, that's definitely something you should be proud of.
Hmm.
Um, so I feel like anybody I've talked to that has been on medication or is currently on medication, either are or aren't in therapy. You're currently in therapy, correct?
Yep. I see
So
her. Well, we talk once a week.
okay, okay, once a week.
Yeah.
Is it through like Better Health or anything?
No, it's through the state.
Okay.
It's some like charity fund down in San Antonio. She lives down there, but we talk on the phone and it's free.
Yeah.
So that's kind of nice.
So let me ask you something on that since it's free therapy, does it help?
Yes, I didn't like it at first,
Mhm.
because it was about God. And I was just like, is this really for me, or do I need like a regular therapist? Well, it turns out it is for me. I've been doing it for a year and a half now.
Okay.
Um, and she really just finds the words to from the Bible or from God. She just finds those words and it just resonates in my head. And she has gotten me so calm in the last year. I'm so much more calm. I've even asked my kids, like, hey, is mom yelling more or, am I more calmer? And they're like, and no, you're definitely calmer. And I'm like, well, that's good. I just making sure that you guys see it too, not just me.
Right. And the reason I ask about therapy is because I feel, and this is just my personal feelings on medication. I feel if you're on any kind of depression meds that
Mm.
you should be going to therapy too.
Yeah, it's
Because
kind of a rule now in
yeah,
Texas.
because I
Hmm.
feel like if you're willing to be put on medication, then you should be willing to put in the work to get better too, you
Right,
know.
right.
And
Yeah, because for years I just took the medication, never got help.
right. And I know a small collection of people that are on medication and that don't go to therapy and don't see a difference.
Yeah,
And sometimes you just kind of want to reach out to those people like, hey, like, I see you're still struggling and taking medication. Like, have you thought about therapy?
yeah.
And I don't know, for some reason, therapy is just like such a red flag for so many people.
It
And
still is, yeah.
yeah, and I've always tried to understand why there are people against therapy, but then I sit there and process it and remember how I was when I first started venturing into therapy. Like when I started therapy, I probably should have started sooner
Mhm.
because I reached a mental breakdown and a suicide attempt before I went.
Mhm.
And when I had my first 2 sessions, couldn't look at my therapist in the eyes and
Yep.
just tears. That's
Yep.
all I did was cry for 2 hour-long sessions.
Mhm.
And after that, third session came in and my therapist wasn't like aggressive about it, but she's like, okay, you've got that emotion out. Now, where do you want to be? What do you want out of this therapy session?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I was only with her for about 6 months before I came back down to Florida. And, you know, I'm grateful that I was able to find the therapist that I have now, because who knows where I would have been. I
Yeah,
probably wouldn't be in this healthy, safe space. I probably would have never started the podcast, and hearing people like yourself that are doing both is kind of refreshing, because I feel like I either hear one or the other, not both.
right, right. Well, the reason I'm doing it is kind of like you. I was just down in the dumps and I actually stopped taking my meds. I was trying to get off them
Right.
after 10 years and it did not go well at all. I
Yeah.
mean, it wasn't that they were doing anything wrong. It was I was not communicating that this is not working and they weren't getting me off my meds the right way. Think I should have done it slower.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it was ruining my relationships. I was getting suicidal. I made a plan. And finally, I just went back to the doctor and I was like, look, I can't do this anymore. You have to put me back on this medication.
Yeah.
And
I'm
it
honestly
wasn't,
surprised they cold turkeyed you like that.
they didn't really cold turkey me. They tried to cut it down
Mm,
slowly, but I think we should have done it even slower. But at the same time, I really like my medicine. It keeps me sane.
yeah. Yeah. Um,
So,
I remember when my mom stopped taking her depression meds, and I think she went like 3 days without taking it, and she was hallucinating. She was, screaming on the phone and just like all over the place. And I asked her, I'm like, "Did you stop taking your medication? Because like you can tell when those extremes are completely different."
right, right.
And she's like, "Yes, I stopped taking them. I just want to be normal like everybody else," and started crying and everything. I said, "Mom, that medication makes you normal. Like
Right.
you're missing that chemical in your brain that you just can't stop taking that shit. You will die
Mhm.
that way."
Yep.
And she started taking them again, and I guess, and I don't, again, being my mom, she has been on Xanax, I think, since she was a teenager, and the
Yeah.
doctor supposedly checked her into rehab to detox from Xanax because of how much damage it's doing to her.
Yeah.
Um, as much as I would love to say how much of a great thing that is for her, I don't know if she's telling the truth, and that's the
Right.
sad part of the relationship of our parents.
Right. Yeah. You don't know if they're telling the truth. I don't know what kind of medication my mom's ever been on, but I do know that she's taken meds in the past. And my dad told me that she just goes cold turkey on them. My ex-husband, he's done the same thing. They've tried to put him on the same medicine as me, and he'll take it for 2 weeks and then he'll go cold turkey and it makes him crazy. I know. Well, people don't give it enough of a try either.
Right, right.
Take it for 2 weeks and then go cold turkey. I mean, you haven't even given it a chance to work.
And I feel
So,
like it's the same way with people that start therapy that
that
expect
too.
changes after one session.
Yep. After one
And
session, I've had some kids' parent because I work in with therapists, and I had some kid's parent call one of the therapists and after like 5 visits, and he's like, "This just isn't working. We're not doing this fast enough." And it's like, wait a minute, you gotta give that kid a chance.
she used the word fast enough,
Yeah,
really?
it's not going fast enough. And I was like, what? Like I've been doing therapy for a year and a half. I could still do another year and a half, you know? My
That's
son's been doing
wild.
it since he was younger. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. So your son, he's in therapy as well?
Yeah, we go see his therapist once a week now. It was
Okay.
every 2 weeks, but ever since what's been happening lately, once a week.
Right.
So
So
he needs it.
it seems to be helping him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
he's talking more about dad and how it upsets him, but he's also talking about, like I want him to be proud of me. I want him like I hope he's watching down on me and I'm like, yeah, of course he is.
Right.
We may be mad at him some days, but we still love him.
How's your relationship with him?
With my son,
Hmm?
actually, it's gotten a lot better in the last
Yeah.
year. Just
Good.
because I haven't been angry, I'm not screaming at him. When I ask him to do things, yes, he's 16 and he's gonna say, "Oh, mom,
Right.
but no, it's like, "Hey, dude, we gotta go.
Right.
Let's do this." So he has more respect for me now, I think, than he did when he was little.
Yeah. I mean,
Because I mean, having a screaming parent every morning is not fun.
I hear you. That's when I lived with my mom when I was living in Jersey, my sister wouldn't get up for school. And I swear to you, when I tell you,
Mm.
the entire time I lived up there, my mom screamed at my sister to wake up in the morning.
Yep. My mom used to do the same thing.
And the crazy part is she was like 17. She
Yep.
wasn't a little kid. And it's like, at what point do you stop screaming and realize that it's not working?
Right.
And I remember we all had a conversation at dinner one time about it, and I said something to her. I'm like, Mom, you realize you don't have to scream at her every single morning, right? If she misses school, that's on her.
Yeah.
And I think this is also around the time when she was going into college, and she had like the early start program, and she wasn't waking up for that. She was on a scholarship, and I told Mom, I said, listen, if she loses that scholarship, that's on her. You need to
Yeah.
let her learn that lesson.
That's the way I am.
And, she ended up losing her scholarship because of that reason. And my mom's sitting there having sympathy and all that stuff. I'm like, I feel bad, but at the same time, I don't.
Yeah,
Because
because she didn't wanna get up.
if it was me, you would have told me, oh, well, it's your own damn fault it happened.
Yep.
So keep that same energy.
Yep.
Which kind of brings me to communication, our favorite conversation of today's podcast. Um, Number one being eye contact.
Yep.
Tell me why you feel that is one of the most important parts of communication.
When you're looking at somebody in their eyes, and I've noticed this just by having this podcast with you, you're focusing a little bit more on me, okay? And I know you, so I'm okay with staring you down, no problem. But if I didn't know you from David and I met you on the street, I would be looking down, I'd be looking over there,
Right.
anywhere else I can besides you and focus on you because you might judge me. You might think I'm a bad person. I might say something stupid, all that kind of stuff's just going through your head. So communication, it's really important for people that I care about. Um, I think it's important just to have a friendly face in the streets, but boy, it's hard for me to look somebody straight in their eye.
Right. And that kind of I feel like that's also an internal boundary too when
Yeah,
you're talking to strangers and you don't feel quite comfortable with that person just yet.
right.
You don't look at them in the eye. I
Yeah.
think anytime I'm in the grocery store, anytime that I'm, out in a public setting, I will literally stare at the freaking ground and not look at anybody.
Or I'll glance at somebody and look away.
Right, right, right. And I feel like it always just, for some reason, people always get that weird vibe about like eye contact or just
Yeah,
like talking to people. Like sometimes if I'm walking by like an old couple or walking by an older person sitting inside, I feel like we don't say, how are you doing enough to people.
yeah, you're right.
And one of the guests that I had on here, Jason, that I spoke of when we first started the podcast, I feel it's super important that we acknowledge strangers. We don't know what everybody's going through.
Right.
I'm not saying go to a random person and start hitting on them, but
Right.
it's like a simple smile, a simple "How are you?" acknowledging people that are around you. Like,
Yep.
for example, I went to Anclote Pier fishing pier yesterday, and I was watching the sunset. And this bigger kid walks by me. He had to have been maybe early 20s, I think, something like that. And I know he wasn't all there. Like maybe he was autistic or something like that.
Okay.
I don't want to assume. Uh,
Right.
and he just started talking. He's like, oh, it's a really good sunset out tonight, and he had a little bit of a speech impediment. And I said, yeah, man, it's really nice out. And he's like, how are the fish? I'm like, oh, I'm not really fishing. You might want to ask those guys over there, but I'm here for the sunset. The sunset's just something uh that I love watching. So he walks a little bit down the pier, and it looks like he's trying to start conversations with other people. When he's walking back to his group of friends or maybe family, he's like, "Oh, I hope you have a good night." I said, "You too, man. Be safe." And
Yeah.
it's things like that. It's
Yep.
You don't know how much of a difference you're gonna make in somebody's life, whether it's big or whether it's small.
Yeah.
And with you being in the kind of work that you're in, I can only imagine how many hundreds and thousands of people you talk to in a matter of a couple months.
It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And some of the worst cases. Those are the ones that don't go to therapy. They'll call, but they won't show up.
Interesting. So you think,
Mm.
why do you think that is? Do you think it's just kind of a fear thing, or
I think it is a fear thing. We have a lot of college students in our town, and I think their parents, like say, "Hey, I think you need therapy." And they're trying to get their kid in, and they make the appointment, they do all the paperwork, but when it comes down to it, they're just too nervous. They're afraid to open up.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's hard to open up. And even if you don't want to talk about it, sometimes you just have to in order to get it out there, put it on a piece of paper, put it out there in the air, something.
And I feel like we're in that generation of college kids that social media being as rampant as it is and everything, and there's still, as much as people don't want to admit it, there's still a stigma over mental health and talking about it.
Yep.
Um, there was one specific documentary that just recently came out called Quiet on the Set. It was about the Nickelodeon whole
Oh
thing.
yeah, I haven't seen it, but yeah, I've heard about it.
Without spoiling it or anything or what went on, I said on my Facebook, I said, listen, I'm glad that everybody's talking about this. I'm glad we're bringing awareness to this. But can we as a society stop waiting until these stories come out and somebody taking their life to talk about these
Yeah,
things?
really.
Because if we're not openly saying, hey, I'm here for you, or charity, I'm here for you if you need something, if I'm not openly saying that, I'm not doing my due diligence as a human being to make sure my
Right.
fellow person is okay.
Right. Sometimes it's just a text. I mean, I
Yeah.
do that all the time. We do it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I text my friend earlier, like, "Hey, how are you today?" Because she is in between houses. She doesn't have a place to live. Her daughter's not with her. So it's little things like that that makes you know that people care about you. But it's also it empowers you, You're like, "Hey, I'm checking up on this person. I'm making sure that they're okay too."
Right.
So,
And holding these kind of conversations has an impact on people that you don't know it's going to impact. Like, for example, again, back to the fishing pier. Couple months ago, maybe about 6 months ago, I ran into a guy I haven't seen in about 6 months, or 6 months, and probably like 10 years, maybe more. And he, when I started walking back to the car after the sun was going down, he looks at me. We make contact a couple different times, and I wasn't sure if it was somebody I recognized or not. And he called me by my last name, and I said, Copeland? I'm like, dude, I haven't seen you in like 10 years, and we were catching up and everything. I'm like, how you doing, man? Like, how's everything going? He's like, oh, I'm just, trying to find peace. I'm kind of in a really bad spot right now, just out here to find peace. I'm like, oh, that's great, man. If you ever need anything, just reach out. And without even mentioning it, without saying anything, he's like, you're doing really great things with your mental health podcast. I haven't talked to this kid in 10 plus years. And he
is he
said,
on the page?
I don't think he's in the group. I'm not sure.
That's
But
crazy.
I guess a mutual friend of ours has shared it or something. Um, but it was wild to have a conversation I haven't seen with somebody in like 10 plus years.
Yeah, I bet.
And
Wow.
I just I wish more than anything that people would just be willing to talk about their struggles more often.
Yeah.
'Cause I know trauma
Especially
is hard.
men.
Yeah.
Especially men. Because my
No.
ex-husband, he just didn't, he would bottle it all up until the very last minute, and then it's like, here comes the explosion,
Right.
and now we have to deal with that. And I just kind of got tired of it. I really did. And, addiction was there, not taking medication, not going to therapy. He just, you know, his narcissism, I'm not sure if that's him or if it's the alcohol.
Could be a mix of both.
So it could be a mix of both.
Yeah.
It sounds like it to me, just the way his family was talking to me.
Mhm.
So, they're all perfect and I'm the one in the wrong. So
Of course, it's always our fault.
it's always our fault.
Yeah. Um,
So
but kind of on the same conversation is, friendship and communication. Um,
yeah.
as you know, without me directly saying any names,
Hmm.
I had to end a very long friendship, and probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And it was basically on the premise of there was no communication from the other
Hmm.
side. It was just me putting in the effort. It was just me making sure that they were okay. anytime I would express how much it hurt that they weren't reaching out to me, they were basically ignoring me, and just it just kind of seemed like it was on purpose. It was
Yep.
always met with excuses. I was always met with I'm busy. It was always met with this, and this. Okay, it's fine after the first three times because I'm an
Right.
idiot and I'm forgiving.
Right.
Um, and the last time that we spoke was in January, and it was over a social media thing. And then it just progressed in my head, and it got worse and it got worse. And it was because no communication was happening there. And it shouldn't be my responsibility to make sure a
No,
friend
it has to be
stays
on
together.
both parts.
Right.
Yeah, both parts.
And I just wonder if you've ever had a similar experience with a close friend where you just had to cut ties because they weren't putting in the effort you were putting in, or any at all for
Actually, yes. The same week I left my ex-husband.
that. Hmm.
Um, I have a friend that is doing drugs. She's drinking, she's doing whatever she can get her hands on, basically. And she's getting my little niece involved in all the adult stuff. And I'm just kind of like, all right, we can't be doing this. She's only 12, 13. And it's just got to the point where things started exploding at my friend's house. And she's like, Charity, I just can't deal with this anymore. And I'm like, all right. So, not saying, I'm not trying to say that like karma's a bitch or anything, but yeah, karma is a bitch kind of. Well, I was
Karma sometimes
18,
needs to happen.
right. I was 18 and I was doing drugs, and my friend decided that she and my mother were going to follow me around and try to get me to quit. I don't know what their idea was. I get that they were concerned about me, but at the same time, it was kind of odd that my mother and my one of my friends is running around trying to find me. So I called her mother the same week I left my husband, and I told her, "Look, I think your daughter's going down the wrong path. I'm not here to badmouth her. I'm not here to do all this, but I think that there's some issues going on that you don't know about." Well, she's got access to her mother's bank account, and she's been draining her mother's bank account.
Oh no.
So, I told my friend's mom, I said, "Hey, if you need me, I'm here. I'm also going through something. I'm leaving my husband." Her mom has always been very sweet to me, super nice. She kind of got run over by her dad with his narcissism. And so now she's having to deal with it with her daughter now that her husband's gone. And so it's like she got rid of one narcissist, and now another one's coming into her life and doing it all over again. And man, I feel so bad for her, but I think she has some plans in the works. I haven't spoken to her, but I think she's trying to do the right thing and get my friend's brothers involved and try to get her some help that she actually needs, because she's dating one of my best friend's ex-boyfriends. That's how bad it's gotten.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm
That
just
just
like,
sounds
wait a minute,
chaos.
that loser?
Oh my goodness.
So, no, I get it. I've been friends with this girl since we were in middle school, and she was heavier than me. And we were at a slumber party, and I was the only girl that would talk to her. And we became really good friends. And now that I think about our past relationship, she kind of weeded out my other friends so she could be my best friend. And it's just interesting how
Isn't it so weird that people do that?
I don't know why.
You
What
know
are you
what's
so
crazy
jealous
about
of?
that is the person that I was talking about did that shit too. Like,
Really?
yeah,
Yeah.
so there was three was it three?
Yeah, I
So
think
there's
so.
three very specific people that
Yep.
they were friends with. One blocked me out of nowhere without a word, and me and her were really close, and I don't know to this day what happened. Uh,
Right.
then there was another friend who they would badmouth to me all the time, and they were in the group, and they would ask for like donations and stuff like a GoFundMe because they were reckless and because they made bad decisions with their kids and blah blah blah.
Right.
And they convinced me to remove that person out of the group because she was just toxic, like really toxic. And then our friendship fell apart, mine and that person. And any hate or any anger I had for anybody that they were associated with was because of what they told me about that person.
Right.
Um, and then the very last person was somebody that they were very close to, who I was super cool with. We all had Friendsgiving together, and I was super cool with them. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'm blocked by them too.
Yep.
And there was always one other person that we're still mutual friends with, who anytime she would comment on my post, that person would immediately reply, say, "Oh no, that's my best friend. That's my best friend." And she's like, I'm a little I'm a little lost right now.
Yeah. I don't know what to think about that. It's more like it's all about possession, really. You're
Yeah,
mine, and you can't, nobody else can have you.
right. And it was just a matter of it started becoming less and less when things were starting to get better in their life, and our
Mhm.
friendship just started falling apart after they left the group. And it was just like I did everything I could to make sure they had a safe space. They needed somebody to talk to them. They needed somebody when they were grieving, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And then it just fell completely apart after they left the group. And I don't know what happened. To this day, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Uh, but I had to cut ties because, our common theme, communication.
Yep.
If you're not telling me what I'm doing wrong or what I can do better,
Right.
I don't know what you guys want from me, because everybody who I've ever met in my life, you included, I try to be everything that I can for everybody in my life. Maybe that's not the best thing to do in all situations, and I will forever acknowledge that, but
Mhm.
it's who I am as a person.
Yeah.
If I'm fucking up, tell me I'm fucking up.
Right.
But don't sit here and treat me like an asshole and not tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Right. It's like screaming at your kids in the morning. Stop screaming at them. Tell them what you want them to do,
Right.
you know?
And it's just like I'm not a mind reader.
Mm-mm.
It's I don't know, I don't know what I can do differently, or trying to tell other people how to treat this person better. It's just like I'm doing all I can on my part. And it
Yeah.
was never enough. So I gave up.
Never is. Yeah, it's never enough.
Um
Especially when the communication's not there. It's never enough.
yeah, yeah. And which kind of we talked about it a little bit when we were covering therapy. And that's normalized talking or taking kids out of school for
Oh,
doctor
yeah.
appointments, for therapy appointments. So I want to hear your perspective on that and why you feel that should be normalized.
So, working for therapists, I hear a lot of parents say, "Well, I have to work." And I'm like, "But isn't your kid's mental health more important?" Well, I've kind of been listening to these parents and I took my own advice, and I leave at 1 o'clock on Wednesdays in the middle of the day, and we drive. It takes me an hour to pick him up from school, get over to therapy. An hour to do therapy, and then about 30 minutes to either take him back home or take him back to school, depending on what time it is. And I feel like it should just be so normal. It's like a regular doctor's appointment. If your kid was sick, you'd take him to the doctor. If they had
Right.
104 fever, you'd take him to the hospital. So I don't know why it's just not normal. Like all these parents want a 6 o'clock appointment, 7 o'clock appointment. Well, maybe once a month you need to do it, maybe twice a week, maybe once a week. You decide
Right.
what's best for you, but you also have to decide what's best for you and the kid, not
Right.
just yourself. And
It's
I
just
think it
kind of
should be
like that.
more normal.
Right. It's kind of like that disconnect between mental health and health,
Yeah,
and should be all one thing.
it's all
So
one thing.
I completely agree with you. I wish mental health was taken uh as serious as it is now, when we were kids, when we were
Yeah.
teenagers, because therapy was basically, not talked about, not encouraged when
Well,
we were younger.
also when we were kids, didn't the therapist tell our parents what we said? I
So I
I
think
think
that,
they
don't they
did.
legally have to,
I know that
if
legally
they're
they
under
have
18?
to. Legally they have to if you are like threatening to commit suicide or kill somebody else, something serious. But like if you kiss that girl in 5th grade, your mom's not going to find out about it
Right.
nowadays. But like if that was me when I was in 5th grade, oh yeah, I think my mom would have found out about it through my therapist that I kissed some boy.
Mm,
So I feel like it's changed a lot more too. Like
yeah.
some parents think, okay, well, I need to know what my kid said in therapy. And his therapist comes out all the time and he's like, well, I can't really tell you what he said. And I'm like, I'm not
Right.
worried about it.
Yeah.
Like that's y'all's time. That's not my time. That is y'all's time,
Right.
you
So
know?
then don't they have like a parent and child like joint therapy together?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I'll go into therapy with him and we'll sit and we'll talk about what's been going on lately. But I usually try to do it for only like 10 to 15 minutes. So, um, that way they can have the rest of the time. He needs to talk about whatever he wants to talk about, you know?
That's good.
So,
That's good. I
yeah,
like that. I
yeah.
feel more parents should be more open to that experience because
I I also don't stay in the waiting room,
right. Oh, okay.
because I don't wanna hear anything.
Yeah,
They are kinda loud and there is a sound machine outside, but I'd rather just go outside
makes
and sit on
sense.
my phone for, like, 45 minutes so that way I don't even hear what they're talking about, you
Right.
know?
Gives them that privacy and that
Yeah,
trust.
yeah.
So, uh, you have two sons or
I
one son?
have I have my son, and
Right.
then my stepdaughter, she's with her dad, but we are in the works of getting a divorce. So I haven't
Right.
talked to her,
Okay.
but I did get to see her, and I think that was probably the saddest part of the whole breakup was watching my stepdaughter come up to me after helping raise her for the last 7 years, and she's crying like a fucking baby, and
Yeah.
she does not want me to go.
Yeah.
And man, that hurt really bad.
I'm sure it did. Yeah. I couldn't imagine.
And
Um,
now I'm not really texting her because I don't know if it's appropriate.
yeah.
So I did tell her brother, I was like, "Hey, you know, maybe you should just reach out to her and see if she's okay.
Yeah.
Because if it comes from you, it might look a little bit better."
Right.
But he
Maybe
said
that's
he'll do
something.
it.
Maybe that's something to talk about with the therapist too, just to see what's
Yeah,
be the
what's
right thing to
appropriate.
do. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I feel that it complicates things and maybe confuses her a little bit.
Yeah, I don't wanna do that.
Yeah, right, right. So I definitely would understand why it would feel weird.
Yeah.
So that kind of this conversation kind of goes right into the one of the last topics is apologizing to kids.
Oh,
Um, I feel I heard the words "I'm sorry" so often that I become numb to it, and it was never sincere.
never.
So taking my experience completely out of it and speaking to you as a mom, how do you go about apologizing to your kids? And do you feel that kids are entitled to an apology?
They're not entitled to their apologies at all. Especially when they're getting in their teen years and they wanna start acting out and they wanna say things that are not appropriate, which I'm fine with. Okay, you're gonna be a teenager, you're gonna act out, you're gonna do this, but at the same time, I have my ground rules, okay?
Right.
But at the same time, his mother has mental health issues, so there's gonna be days where I'm crying. Here lately, it's been quite a few of them. There's gonna be some days where I'm irritable. Here lately, there's been a few. And when that stuff happens, I have to put myself in check. Like, "Hey, you said this to him earlier, or you were pissy with him earlier when it really wasn't his fault, it was just your day." So then I have to cool myself down for a second, go back and say, "Hey, Devin, I'm sorry for what I did earlier." So I'm letting him know I acknowledge what I did earlier. But I'm also giving him an "I'm sorry," and yeah, like you said, you could hear "sorry" all day, but as long as that person is acknowledging they're sorry and what they did wrong and how they're going to fix it, and they actually go fix it, that's what a real apology is, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I feel, us experiencing narcissism to the highest degree on both of our
Yeah.
ends, that it's so hard to take people serious when they apologize because of, you know, whether it was your mom physically or mentally abusing you and then saying sorry after she did it, but then
Right.
repeats it.
Yeah.
Um, I've had sentences said to me from my mom, I hope you have a nice life after I put up boundaries. And then after that, it would be, I'm sorry if I ever said that. Like she would put the word if there. I'm like, dude, I literally have a screenshot of you saying it. Like,
If I ever said that.
yeah. And it's so funny to me when I hear the words I'm sorry from so many people because it's like, are you sorry because you're sorry, or are you sorry because I called you out on something?
Right.
Like
Right.
the person that we were discussing about earlier. If
Well,
there's
that
an
that
apology, I
was my
repeat.
husband. I called him out on something. I called him on his bullshit, basically. I told him, I said, "Okay, listen. You're broke. You're asking me for more money. You won't quit drinking. You want to buy Amazon packages all the time. You want to go out to eat all the time. So there's got to be a boundary there somewhere."
Right.
And he laughed in my face about it, and I was just kind of like, "All right, not much I can do here because you obviously don't see the problem." And obviously, I'm the problem because I'm not giving you more money. So I think it's time for me to go.
Yeah. And
And then
it's
he
great
just
that you walked
completely,
away.
yeah, and he completely stopped talking to me. Like he wouldn't even, for a whole week, I tested him because what I've been doing in therapy is telling my therapist, okay, this is what I'm going to do next time we get into an argument. I let us sleep through the night, just go to bed. Yeah, okay, we're going to bed angry, but we're going to bed together. The next day, I will text him when I'm at work, like, "Hey, can we talk about this later?" And that seemed to be working the last year. But I'm always the one that's putting in the effort.
Right.
"Hey, can we talk about this later?" And finally, I tested him this last time. I was like, "Let's see if he even bothers me. Let's see if he even texts me to see if he even cares." Not one text. Instead, he came in and he asked my son where I was and if I was mad or whatever. And I was just like, okay, I heard you were talking. I heard you were looking for me. Can you please come talk to me? And he refused to come talk to me. He said, "What do you have to say to me?" And after that, I knew it was over. I was just
Yeah.
like, if you're not even going to communicate with me face to face at this point, like, what is the point of being in this relationship? And
Yeah.
that was my longest relationship. So that was kind of hard to walk away from. But we're a month into it, and I'm in my own apartment with my
Yeah.
son, and we're doing fine.
You're making great changes for yourself,
Yep.
and I feel it's so commendable that you're self-aware enough to realize that you needed to walk away from that, as hard as it was, because I feel most people in that situation would just keep forgiving, would just keep giving them a chance after chance, and
Yeah,
10, 20 years go by and it hasn't gotten better and you're stuck.
I know.
Um, so that kind of goes into one of our last conversations, is talking about your faith. How has your faith been for you since that, pending divorce, since that breakup?
Um, wow. Faith has really taken a turn on me for the last month.
Hmm.
Reading my Bible more. We started reading a book called Messy People because there's so many messy people out there, Chris. You
Yeah,
and I are messy people.
absolutely.
But God saves all the messy people. We're reading a story right now about, oh, I forget her name, but she's a prostitute. And God saves her and her family because she did something to help get his word out, right? So I just started praying and I started journaling and I started doing all this stuff on a daily. I started making myself do things. And I don't know, prayer is just so empowering to me now because I got an apartment and I got my tax return in the same day. That never happens.
Right. Right.
That never happens. So I was able to actually get this apartment myself with my credit, with my history, and pay for the deposit and the first month's rent without anybody's help. And I was super proud 37 years later, but hey, I did it, right?
Yeah.
But it's those little struggles that you're just like, "Oh my God, what if? What
Right.
if?" And so I just started praying about it. And I still, like you said, um, I'm still in my head. I'm still thinking about what if, what could have happened, or I should have done this. But really, it's all in the past. Now all we can do is look towards the future and hope that it's going to be great. And I
Yeah.
think it will be. I think it will be.
Yeah. And for me, um, I'm not, I don't pray every day, even though I feel it's important for people of faith to do so.
It
But
is.
I feel like I do it in a different way, putting energy out into that universe and manifesting good things and doing the work behind those manifestations.
Yeah.
I feel is essentially the same as praying,
Yes.
just in a different lane. And I have had conversations with people that, are daily churchgoers that are reading the Bible every day. And I've had conversations with people saying that, Jesus Christ and God changed their life and everything. And I love it for you guys that you can openly talk about it and it helps you so much. And for people like me who has a little bit of trauma behind the scenes of religion
Hmm.
because of my grandparents, it's hard for me to immerse myself into that world. So I found a means of Zen, a means of energy in the universe and all things like that. So essentially, your faith doesn't always have to align with somebody else's faith
No.
as long as we can communicate that and have that conversation, because I feel in a society of fast information and instant communication, that translation gets lost in there somehow. And
Hmm.
it's like, oh, well, you don't follow what I follow, so we can't talk. I'm like, no, we can
Right.
still have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I mean, having a religion, it doesn't really matter to me. My friend she's Catholic, I'm Christian, and we're best friends. I've actually gone to church with her one time, or mass, I don't know what they call it.
right?
Um, but yeah, it's interesting, and she can tell me a story and mine's just a tiny bit different, and then we find that difference and what it's really supposed to mean, you know?
Right.
But at the same time, I also have some of my friends, they grew up in church and they have those issues, like even my mother, they forced her to go to church her whole life. I wasn't forced to go to church my whole life. So it makes a difference, especially when you're a child, I think. Um, I brought my dad back into church when I was young. I was in middle school. And we started going to church together. Well, my mom wouldn't go because she refused to. Well, then my dad died and she started going back to church. So it's kind of just been like a off and on thing for my family.
Right.
But watching my father when he passed away from cancer, just sitting there reading his Bible, I'm like, man, this guy really believes.
Yeah.
He really wants to go to heaven. And I know he's there, but at the same time, it's nice to have the adult figure in your life that believes in God and you actually somebody you trust.
Yeah.
So I think that's one reason why I have gone so strongly towards it. Especially with some of the conversations that I've had with my husband lately, that I was just trying to get him to open up with me more. Maybe we can have more of a godly relationship because he is a Christian too, but he just has his addictions and his little
It's on that
demons
path
that
of
he
self
just can't,
destruction.
yeah, just on
Yeah.
a path of self-destruction. And, he's just done a lot in the last year that have turned me off.
Right.
So,
Right. So at the end of every podcast, I'd like to ask the same question to every one of my guests. So I'll ask you as well. What is one thing that you would change in this mental health community?
oh wow. Like we talked about it. Therapy. You and you know what? I found a therapist right before I found Tracy, my therapist I have now. And the lady before her, I did not like her at all.
Hmm.
She sat there and she was like, "Oh, okay. Well, how does that make you feel?"
How does that
It was
make you
just
feel?
kind
Right.
of like nonchalant,
Yeah.
like, Are we really doing this or
Yeah.
are we just talking?" Like,
Got to get those hours in.
yeah, gotta get
Right.
those hours in. And it's like some people I don't know if their game is off that day or if that's just their personality, but you really have to find somebody that you can trust,
Yeah.
that you feel comfortable with.
Right.
Because I know you feel comfortable with your therapist. I know I do mine. I mean, I text her when I got the apartment, like, "Hey, next time I talk to you, I'll be in my new apartment." it's little things like that. Like, this person is not your best friend, but they are there for you. You
Yeah.
know, this person is a professional, this is their job, but they also need to have a little bit of personality in there, you know, not just nonchalant, get my hours in. And, you know, it can be tough because I saw that lady like 3 times, 4 times before I was like, "All right, this isn't for me anymore." Like, she's not the one. Um, so yeah, it might take a little bit,
Hmm.
maybe even 3 or 4 therapists, but getting up and going to that appointment, it's only an hour.
Right.
Chris and I have been sitting here for an hour, so it can't be too bad.
Right.
So I just hope people start trying it more. I really
Right.
do.
Yeah. I completely agree, and I'm glad that you brought up the multiple therapists thing because I feel that's a lot of people's issues with therapy is they had that one really good therapist, but something went wrong, and then they gave up on therapy and didn't start looking again. And I feel it's so important to not give up on that journey of healing because not every therapist style is going to be the same. Not every
Right.
conversation is going to be the same. The first couple sessions might sound like all your other ones because they have to get to know you. They have to ask, what's going on. And I think the hardest part for people is starting over. So I totally understand that.
Yeah, it's starting over.
Yeah. And for me, regardless of how much my rent has gone up, I'm equating this to rent, but I haven't moved out of this place regardless of how expensive it's getting, because I moved around my entire life.
You wanna
And
be somewhere for a
yeah, and
while.
I want some security. I want that place of belonging, and it's something I provided for myself and didn't give up on holding that space for myself. So
Yeah,
like therapy, don't give up on therapy just because
right.
you have one bad experience because they're not all the same.
And you are allowed to take a break. I mean, my therapist and I sometimes we take the whole summer off because 'cause I'm busy with the kids.
Right.
Sometimes we'll take the whole month of December off because 'cause I've got my birthday, my stepdaughter's birthday, Christmas, you know, it's just busy sometimes. It's okay to take a break. You
Yeah,
don't have to do it every week. You don't have to do it once a month. Do it when you need it. Do it when it's convenient for you and your therapist, you know?
absolutely agreed. Um, so at the end of every podcast, as you know, I like to read a quote based on whatever the topic is. And since this topic is on friendship, before I read it, do you have any last words that you want to say to the listeners?
You guys are great. I love this group. I really do. I'm
Yeah,
so glad I've been a part of it ever since it started. And Chris, you are amazing. And I don't think people tell you that enough. And you are going through some hard stuff just like me. And I really appreciate your kind words. And I hope you appreciate my kind words.
absolutely.
And we will always keep that communication with each other. So
Definitely.
don't worry about that.
um, I definitely appreciate you. I appreciate the support. Always appreciate the messages because you're one of the few consistent people in my life. So thank you for coming on this podcast. Thank you for supporting the group and doing all that you do to contribute to not only my life but also the group. So thank you again for being on the podcast.
No problem. Thanks for
Um,
having me.
yeah. So today's quote is by Miss Bonnie Arbor, and it reads, "You are a piece of the puzzle of someone else's life. You may never know where you fit, but others will fill the holes in their lives with pieces of you."
Yep.
And it's I think the hardest thing is losing friends, whether it's by death or whether it's by them walking out of your life. And
Right.
there's always going to be other people that'll fill that place, and it's the best thing to do is not expect it to happen. Sometimes it just happens.
Right. You just gotta
And
wait.
yeah. And, people like yourself, people like Judy, Caleb, and so many others have been a strong part of the foundation. And while one person goes away, you guys move up and you guys
Yeah.
hold the fort together. And, I'm forever grateful for you, forever grateful for my listeners and all the people that support around the world. You guys are absolutely everything to me. So always grateful, always grateful.
Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And for all my listeners, thank you again so much for listening to today's podcast. Again, This is my lovely friend Charity, and this podcast will be out soon. Thank you for listening. As always, be well, be gentle with yourselves, and until next time, much love, guys. Take care.